So we're on structural change, but we're going to spend about 20 minutes probably talking about helheten, what do you say in English? The big picture, I guess. So if we think of this picture, and then let's say we want to do DHSS standard, which I think was model, the third one I went through, I think. Looking at you because you were ordering them like that. What shall I do to this picture then? I can do one thing. It's like these matches, you know, arrange the matches to make some pattern or whatever. You know those puzzles? What arrow should I rub out or add or?
We don't really send labor to the resource, right?
Right.
Because it's costless.
So this would be the standard DHSS, wouldn't it? Because then the only question is, this is costless to extract, so it's just like, when do we take this into the economy? But we just sort of open the tap, it doesn't cost anything. The cost is the loss of the resource, the scarcity rate. Okay. If we want to do, which one was that? The second one, I think. The one which kind of matched the data. What do we need to do then? I know in that we sent widgets this way, didn't we? But remember I said it doesn't actually matter. Okay, so it's not that, that's not what I'm after. To make the math easy, we did it the other way around, but here we can stick that way, this way for the whole way. So actually it's kind of a trick question, isn't it? I mean, this is basically the structure. Isn't it? I think we don't need to add or take away any arrows. But if we want to add some details, what would we have here? What kind of function?
This model is the one where the
one that gives us this.
I
don't want to tell you anything more than that.
Just a Cobb-Douglas.
Yeah, that's the one with Cobb-Douglas, right? And the fixed factor, which gives us fixed factor shares, which means that the sum of that slope and that slope will always be equal to this. So then, if we set the model up in such a way that extraction costs are just constant, which is what we do, and there's perfect markets and no scarcity, then we know that this is going to be constant. So the slope is 0, so this slope, given Cobb-Douglas, must be equal to this slope. And remember, in that model, we included capital as well, didn't we? We had this. Actually, yeah, so maybe you were thinking about that. And even in the DHSS, for the previous question, we really should have had an arrow doing this as well, shouldn't we, for the capital? Forgot about that. But we're dropping capital, so let's leave it like this. Because this would do the same job for the long run properties. As long as we're talking about balanced growth paths, we know that the capital basically always just tracks y, doesn't it, in balanced growth? Because otherwise it's just never going to be balanced. if we're focusing on balanced growth paths, capital doesn't really play any role. Okay. Then, if we're taking this basic model and we've dropped capital, and then we're thinking about Solo's mechanisms. Okay. So, what were Solo's mechanisms? Yeah, have a talk amongst yourselves and see if you can nail down, without looking at your notes, Solo's three mechanisms, and think about them in terms of this, okay? I'll give you a couple of minutes, so I'll go, I might even go, yeah, I'll be back in like...
We know when we talked about it, we're just not sure about like what exactly they were.
So what thoughts, give me some thoughts.
Janina, you almost named it.
Say again?
It was something about like that we shouldn't really switch towards less energy demanding goods and sort of mechanism.
Okay, yeah, that's one of them. Or now, so Solo was responding to this limits to growth thing, right?
Right.
On the limits to growth, they were saying, look, the natural resources are going to run out. So it wasn't totally focused on energy. But energy was part of it. So we can think, you can say energy, but you could also think more generally in terms of like non-renewable natural resources. So one of the mechanisms was about consumption patterns, right? So that's what you were saying. So what would we need to add to this to capture that?
More firms?
Right, and well, in fact, there's an infinite number of firms here, but they're all producing the same thing, aren't they? Yeah. So, different types of firms, yeah. I'm sure that's what you're thinking, but I just wanted to make it super clear. Okay, so that would be one of the mechanisms. Have you got any others?
It was something with technical change and like where it came from or something like that. I don't remember.
Okay, so there's actually two kinds of technical change that could help. If you sort of forget about trying to remember the mechanisms and just try and think about what sort of technical change might actually help. If this stuff's running out, what sort of technical change? So if this is running out, one thing that might help would be to switch on the consumption side to stuff that doesn't need.
How much resources we need? Like in decrease, how much resources is needed to make a good? Or like resource intensity of this?
Right. So for the same product, for the same good, could you make it with less resource inputs? Okay. But if we're going to have that mechanism, what do we need to do to the model? How do we show that in the model, kind of, or where do I need to make a change here? So that's one of the mechanisms. I can't remember which one. I think it's, well, whatever. So if we want to allow for technological change making the resource more efficient in the production function, meaning that we need less of the resource, we're going to need to change something here.
Do we need to add research?
We do, yeah, but that's not what I'm after here. Okay, it's in a way more, I was going to say it's more fundamental than that, but moot point. what's more fundamental. We're somehow assuming at this point that there's going to be there's some mechanism that is making resource productivity grow when the resource gets scarcer, but then we're not going deeper into that. But how would that show up, the resource productivity growing? How would that show up here? Like, what would be the notation for resource productivity? AR. Do you see any ARs here? No. So there's yeah. How is that going to show up? Maybe I can go and do the other half of what I plan to do. Oh, nah, we'll do that in a minute. Any thoughts?
What was the question?
So how is this going to show up? Where's it going to show up? There's no ARs here. So we need an AR somewhere, don't we, obviously?
In the production function.
It should show up in the production function. So if we just make them the smallest possible change to this, what would it be? But we want this to show up.
We put it next to R.
Yeah. And then could someone else, we need to do one more thing. Right, because otherwise these units aren't going to match, are they? Because this is like tons per year, and this is going to be widgets per ton per year. But this is raised, R is raised to the alpha, so AR is also going to need to be raised to the alpha, otherwise the units are going to go crazy, aren't they? So then you've got, this has units of widgets per year, and this has units of widgets per year, 1 minus alpha, alpha, it all works out, yeah, in terms of the units. So therefore it makes, if the units kind of work out, it probably makes some kind of sense. But now imagine AR going up, are we then going to need less R, or is there going to be less demand for R from these boys? No. Because we can just mathematically take this outside, can't we? AR going up is just the same as AL going up. I mean, except with you've got an alpha and a 1 minus alpha, so this doesn't make as much difference. If you double, if you add 1 to this or double this, it doesn't make as much difference as doubling that. But apart from that. So what else do we need to do to the production function to make this make any sense? We need to ditch the Cobb-Douglas and go with what? I'm sure you know this. Go on. We could go with Leontief, or we could go with CES. Leontief would be fine, but it's kind of an extreme case which we use mostly for illustration. If we go with CES, then we have this, don't we? And no, this is how I usually write it, isn't it? Yeah. And we could also have pre-multiplying factors here and here. Okay. Now then, what value makes sense for epsilon? Or what range of values make any sense here?
Was it 1 to minus infinity?
1 to minus infinity is the whole range that make any sense whatsoever. Okay? In this kind of in the context of a production function. Okay? But then there's a subset of that range that makes sense here. So imagine if you had 1, this would boil down to y is ALL plus ARR. Okay. then, if this is like cakes, and this is labor, and this is eggs, you know, it's like, oh, we've got lots of eggs, but no labor, and we can make lots of cakes, and we've got lots of labor and no eggs, we can make lots of cakes.
If that we don't want a lot of substitute material,
Right,
so below zero.
yes, exactly. Should be below zero. Because we don't want these to be very substitutable for each other, right? And that then gives you the effect that you're after, that when AR, you see, if they were very substitutable, imagine that epsilon is 1. And then imagine that AL and AR and the prices of L and R are kind of such that, we could use labor, we could use eggs. Okay. It's pretty much. And then imagine AR goes up. What's going to happen to your demand for eggs?
As a decline, we will only use labor. Right?
You're thinking in the right terms, but...
You said the price for eggs. No, you said, what did you say?
Yeah, if the price had gone up, then you would be totally right. But I said that AR...
Okay, then differently. So you would only buy eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when egg productivity went up, you would buy more eggs, not fewer. If epsilon is greater than 0, in fact. Again, I chose the extreme case to make it super easy and obvious. And we're going to talk about that later. Okay, because that's really important for the third mechanism, the one that we haven't talked about yet today. But for two inputs in final good production, where one is labor and the other is the resource, we know that at the microeconomic level, they're poorly substitutable. Which means that if you can raise the productivity of one of them, firms will need less of it per unit produced. And therefore they will demand less of it for given prices. Okay. So that's the DTC case. And we showed with a fair amount of hand waving, but we sort of could have gone through the whole model, but it would take like 2 lectures just to get through the model, that what did we show? If these two knowledge stocks grow completely independently of each other, with no lab equipment, no standing on shoulders across the sectors, what result did we get then? So remember, if the price of labour is going up, that tends to track why? The price of the resource is staying constant because of this extraction, the nature of the extraction process. So that is going to reduce, if epsilon is negative, as this input gets cheaper, you spend less on it. Okay? Whereas if epsilon had been positive, it would have been the other case, yeah? As the input gets cheaper, let's have more of that, loads more of it. So much more that you end up spending more on it than you did before. But here, when they're poor substitutes, epsilon negative, this one gets cheaper, you spend less on it. Because the ratio, you need them in more or less fixed proportions, eggs and cake. Eggs get cheaper, you spend less on eggs. So then what happens, how much do you spend on egg efficiency when eggs get cheaper? Less. And then what happens to egg efficiency compared to labor efficiency? When you spend less on egg efficiency, it decreases. It decreases, so compared to this, it decreases. And what does that do to your spending on eggs? It pushes it back up again, doesn't it? Because it's like, we need loads of eggs now per cake and per worker. So the spending goes back up. if these stocks grow totally independently of one another, that leads to effectively you have a Cobb-Douglas in the long run. As we were saying, it's really distracting with this room. Got an old student looking in, waiting for me. Right, I'll try and pick up my thread again. Yeah. So that could be an explanation for this, right? And that is an explanation that has kind of been put forward. That, okay, we've got, at the micro short run level, there's very little substitutability between the inputs. But in the longer run, the input efficiencies change relative to each other, and it's as if there's a lot more substitutability. And well, there kind of is more substitutability in the long run, because we adapt the... So kind of in the long run, you can get a Cobb-Douglas, even though in the short run you have something close to Leontief. Okay, so it's a kind of a nice story, but does it fit the data? So if it was going to fit the data, how would it look here? So this is labor productivity. If the story I just told you was going to fit the data, what line should we draw for resource productivity, AR? Okay. Think about that while I go get my cup of tea. What have you got for me? I can't even remember what the question was. Yeah, AR.
But how AR should look in order to match that data within the model, or like...
So, if we built a model
Yeah.
with this function
Mhm.
and with independent knowledge stock, and then we had, so it has this long run Cobb-Douglas property, and then WR is doing this, WL is doing this, AL is doing this. What is AR going to do?
Do like this.
Yeah. Were you in agreement on that? Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah? Pretty much.
Yeah.
Good. Awesome. So, because again, we add up the slopes to get the growth rate. When we've got two things multiplied together, the growth rate of the product is you just add the slopes. This is logs, right? So if L, we're kind of assuming the whole time here that L is just constant. Otherwise it's slightly messier. So ALL, add the growth slopes, is growing along with Y. Balanced growth, yeah. ARR must also be growing along with Y for balanced growth. So if R is doing this, AR must be doing this. If that's not the case, given this kind of thing with epsilon negative, if AR is growing like this, and R is also growing like this, that would show that this would be getting bigger and bigger, wouldn't it, compared to this. This is growing a lot faster than this, so what would the factor share of R do? What would be happening with that? Firms are buying more and more of this compared to this in terms of effective quantities, allowing for the productivity. If you do the math, if you've got loads of this and not so much of this, the share of this should be going down, shouldn't it? But it doesn't, when you actually sort of work, it doesn't make sense kind of thing. Because on the other hand, if you look at WR, it's not going down. If you look at WRR, you know that the share is constant. So yeah, it just doesn't make sense. Okay. Maybe that's just confusing. But to have balanced growth, if AL is doing this and L is doing this and R is doing this, then AR must be doing that. Because ALL and ARR must be growing at equal rates for balance. And you can build a model which will do this for you. And out of the model you will find, yeah, AR is constant because we're investing so little in it that we only just manage to compensate for depreciation in that sector. We're doing like nothing basically to boost resource productivity. And there's a massive problem with that explanation for the long run data, isn't there? The blue line. What's the massive problem with that explanation?
Do you see an increase in AR?
Right. When you look at firms and look at what they're actually doing, you see this increasing a lot. Okay. So it's just not doing the job. So, which isn't to say that directed technological change is irrelevant or so, or whatever, but setting it up with independent knowledge stocks here, it doesn't make sense, and not surprisingly then, the conclusions we get from those models don't match data. Okay. So, it means that the DTC story can't explain this data. Okay. It might be important in some contexts and so on, but we can't use it to explain this data. Okay. What's the third of Solo's mechanisms? Okay. So this, we've done two here, haven't we? We've added the alternative products. Typically we won't do all three at the same time, right? Because then you get a really tricky model. But one thing to do is add alternative products. Another thing is to add DTC, and then you need to change the production function. What's the third way that we can deal with this stuff running out? So imagine this is coal or something. It's running out. What's the third way Solo talks about? It's a hint, okay. If this is coal and coal is running out, what can we do? Right. So what then should we add to the picture? Right. I need a new colour. I'm running out of colours. Whatever. Guess we can have black. So we need another box here, don't we? And we can shift labour from the coal mines to the windmills or whatever. And then, for that, we instead, in the simplest possible case, if we go back to Cobb Douglas, what should I add here? We haven't really done this, but because this is what we're coming to. Instead of R to the alpha, what should I have? Have a think. Talk to your neighbour if you dare, while I'm sitting here staring at you.
And it doesn't work if we have two different resource types. What is the issue to the function?
resources and we do a collection.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Somehow. So we can say, so we had R to the alpha, and instead we're going to have them both here somewhere. So then how do we do that? Should we like have them multiplied by each other, or? Any thoughts?
So that wasn't it, no?
How?
I don't know, what do you think?
I think it looks decent.
What are the units going to look like? They're going to be a bit of a mess, aren't they?
We need like some kind of AR1, AR2, right?
Yeah, if we're going to start worrying about the units, we're going to need AR1, R1,
And then maybe plus AR.
AR2, R2, aren't we?
Mm.
So that's a start. And really, in the original Codd-Douglas, we should have had an ARR as well to the alpha, if we're actually going to be picky about the units. Okay, and a plus, where should the plus be, you think?
Yeah, but also, yeah, first there, and, but I meant originally between the resources, but,
No, I was just being difficult.
yeah,
I
but
realised
also,
you meant that.
I'm thinking
And
maybe
then-
you can do like this CES thing
Yeah.
almost, because that would show some kind of substitution ability between the two resources.
yeah,
You could do, yeah, you could have epsilon, epsilon, 1 over epsilon.
Yeah.
But let's assume, so if we did that, what would we say about epsilon?
but, yeah,
It should be bigger than
Wrong. Bigger than,
bigger than 0.
yeah.
yeah. Couldn't it be 1?
So since we're trying to keep it really simple here at this level, let's just say that it's 1.
Yeah,
So like the first time we started talking about this model, we just said, oh, well, let's do the Omtia. So here, let's do perfect substitutes. Okay. So then we've got just that, haven't we? The effective total resource input is just the sum of the effective inputs of each of them, and then perfect substitutes. So we've done that.
maybe a beta, so we should,
Actually, an alpha, yeah,
yeah. Aha, okay, yeah, makes sense.
because we want that
Yeah.
with the widgets. This is, if we go inside here, this is widgets per year, and inside here, this is widgets per year.
Yeah.
And then we've got 1 minus alpha. So instead of alpha R, sorry, ARR to the alpha, we've got AR1, R1 plus AR2, R2 to the alpha. So if you think of like electricity, let's say. In this case, we're just making electricity from coal, and AR is the sort of conversion efficiency of coal to electricity. But now we can say, okay, this is coal, electricity from coal, this is electricity from wind, they're perfect substitutes. We only care about the total amount of electricity, which then feeds in to the overall production function. So that is the final mechanism. As I said, I don't remember which order I presented them in first, but okay. So we're looking at these 3 mechanisms in the course. Okay, this is a huge, huge part of the course. And what are the implications for policy?
Can you say the mechanisms like 1, 2, 3? What are exactly the mechanisms?
So one is, the red one is, if we think in Solo's terms, how do we deal with a reducing flow of the resource? The red one is we switch between goods on the consumer side. We switch towards goods which need less of the resource. The green one is that final good producers raise resource efficiency. And the black one is that final good producers switch to an alternative resource. And then solar said kind of, oh, and assuming that that's tricky, how do they make it easier? They raise the resource efficiency of the alternative. So R1 is running out, well we want to switch to R2, but we're useless at dealing with R2, so we need to raise AR2. Okay. Right. Wow, that was a bit more than 20 minutes. But I think we're kind of at the right point to really go through this again, to try and give you an overview. So, the green one, there's some plenty in the literature about it, but I kind of said, whoa, you know, maybe it's not as important as people think. The red one is super important, according to me then, for explaining these patterns of demand. Looking at things like, and here R might be aggregate primary energy use, which would include coal, oil, gas, wind, nuclear. Okay. Or total metal use, which would include like iron, aluminium. Yeah. So we're lumping these together in the in the green case here. We're not looking at the fine details of R1s and R2s. We're measuring our flows, casting the net wide, so to speak, and counting coal and oil as part of the same flow when we're doing the green model kind of. Then in the black model, we start saying, let's look more closely at the resource flows and see what happens if, say, one resource starts running out. Can we switch to another? Okay. And this has implications for sustainability under resource constraints. Because even, like rare earths are running out, but there's an awful lot of iron and aluminium out there. I mean, the Earth's crust is a pretty big place, and like 20% of it, or whatever, is made of iron. I don't know exactly the percentage. It's like bigger than 0.01%. And that adds up to an awful lot of iron. But it also has major implications for pollution, which is what we're going to come to. Okay. I think I'm going to stop that video and we'll put it up.